I hope you're having a lovely day today. This is one of my favorite ways to make a nice cup of herbal tea. This is lemon balm from our garden that is still growing, so I went out and picked a whole bunch of it and filled up my Corningware pot with water and brought it to a rolling boil. And then once it's boiling, take it off the heat. I add my lemon balm and then put a lid on it and let it sit anywhere from 5 to up to 20 minutes really to get the lemon balm nice and infused. The aroma that fills our house is just amazing, and lemon balm is known to be a relaxing tea. It is just one of my favorite cozy teas. I remember when I first got this Corningware back in 2020, we got a whole bunch of it at an auction for like $10 for all of it, and I was so afraid to use it because I thought for sure it would crack on the stove because I'd never seen anyone use glass on the stove except for my sister had a tea kettle that was glass that was specifically made for the stove, but for some reason I was panicked about this Corningware glass pot breaking, and so I thought I had to buy these special plate covers, and one day I decided just to try it, and ever since then they're my favorite pots. I love them. They are beautiful. I love that you can see through them. I have one stainless steel pot, and then all my other ones are this Glass Visions Corningware, and then my cast iron and my enameled cast iron. And that's basically the only things that I use on the stove and in the oven. And then obviously my Pyrex and my cookie sheets and muffin tins and stuff for baking. We have been busy trying to get the garden back into shape for when it comes time to plant again for springtime. So Scott has been edging the beds again with wood chips. We get all of our wood chips through Chip Drop, which has been such a blessing. And so many of my herbs are still growing. So I collected a whole bunch of them today to preserve. And also my cotton was still out in the garden. I hadn't picked all of the cotton yet. And with the rosemary and the lavender, I decided to use some of them for cuttings. And that way I can start growing next year's plants now. I've done this before in South Africa. We were stuck there in 2020. And our home in South Africa, we have a rosemary bush and a lavender bush growing that we planted in 2018. We fixed up our garden outside of our house, and ever since then, it has just grown beautifully. So because we were there for such a long time, I took cuttings of the rosemary and put them in water, and then we ended up leaving, catching a repatriation flight, and my sister-in-law put them in dirt for us and took care of them until we came back a year and a half later, and then she gave us our little rosemary plants back. Taking cuttings from rosemary and lavender bushes are the best and easiest way to propagate them. It's easier than growing them from seed. So if you have friends that have either of those plants, instead of buying them, just ask them if you could cut a branch off and then take off all of the lower parts of the stem or the branch, which you saw me doing. And then if you want to plant it directly in soil, you can just rub it in some cinnamon. My mom taught me that. Cinnamon is known to be a rooting hormone, and obviously everyone usually has cinnamon in their house, so you don't have to go buy specific rooting hormone. You can just use cinnamon, and it helps prevent disease from entering your plant and also helps them from rotting. And obviously if you're doing what I'm doing, which is putting these stems in water, then you won't need to be doing that. I've grown them both ways, and I like growing them in water because then I can actually see the roots form. This past spring, I bought a bunch of varieties of mint, and I propagated all of them by taking cuttings and putting them in water, and then they root, and then you can plant them. And then with the water, you just want to make sure that you keep an eye on it, because obviously the water will evaporate and you don't want that to happen. And then I will usually change out the water every other week or so when I think about it. We had a really nice day of working outside, and I wanted to make us some chocolate chip cookies. And like I've said, I make everything with our fresh milled flour, and for cookies I use soft white wheat. I actually did a comparison video where I made the exact same recipe and used hard white in half of the recipe and then soft white wheat in the other half, and we did a taste test trial to see which one we liked better. Taste-wise, they tasted the same. Consistency-wise, the soft white wheat made for a more enjoyable texture, and so that is what I use. It actually took me a long time to find a recipe for fresh milled flour chocolate chip cookies that I really liked, and that also used butter. And so I will link the recipe that I use below. It is my absolute favorite. I am freshly milling my flour after sorting out the grains to make sure there's no debris or rocks, or sometimes you even find dead bugs in it, which I know sounds really gross, but you do not know what gets ground into your flour when you buy your flour. So I at least know none of that is in my flour because I've sorted it all out. And I am using my Bosch mixer to make cookies for the first time, and I actually I totally forgot to switch the whisk, because I wanted to use the whisk to whip up the butter and the sugar so that way it'd be nice and fluffy, and I forgot to switch it over to the dough hook once the dough got thicker after I added the eggs and then the flour. So I continued using the whisks the whole time, but it actually worked just fine. The butter obviously did stick to the side of the bowl when I first whipped it without anything else. I've never had a nice fancy mixer, so I don't know if that's just normal with all mixers that aren't handheld, the butter sticking to the side of the bowl, but that's what happened. It was fine. I just used my spatula and then added my chocolate chips at the very end and stirred those in. I pulled off too much parchment paper for this cookie sheet, and instead of wasting it, because it's very expensive, I cut what I didn't need off, and I will save those under my hutch because I use parchment paper whenever I make tinctures or homemade vanilla or oils, infused oils, to separate the metal cap from the infusion that I'm making, so that way it doesn't rust. So I always keep all of those. You can see how beautifully the cookies turned out. They are crispy on the edges, which I like, and then soft and gooey on the inside. And then I thought I would just show you what I'm doing for dinner tonight, since that is also in process as I am baking the cookies. On weekends, I will typically make my sourdough pizza dough because it will make for dinner on Saturday and then also a meal for Sunday. That way I don't have to think about what I'm cooking for dinner or lunch if we don't have potluck at church. And so it just makes it easy. I'm knocking out 2 or sometimes even 3 meals. I had a ton of ham from a giant ham that we bought, and so that is the topping with onions, and then this is the 5-pound block of cheddar cheese, the Sierra Nevada cheddar that we get from Azure Standard, and I just shred that up and put that on the pizza, cook it in the cast iron skillet, and it is delicious. I hope this gave you some ideas. We had our first snow. It was so cozy, so I thought I would show you our little chickens' first time seeing snow to wrap up the video. What do you think? Do you want to come out? What is that? Stay cozy. What do you think? What do you think of the snow? Oh, Shilajit. You girls look really cold. I'm sure you're not. And you look a little bit pathetic. What do you think of the snow? Let's go see what's happening over here. Have you been digging in your compost? What do you think? What do you think of the snow?